Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's event following Fidelio Talk. My name is Gitika and I'm a director from England. I've done opera and I also work in theatre as well. We've got an amazing panel this evening. We will be joined by Toby Spence, who is a singer from, and we've also got Dougie Boyd, who is a director and artistic director, or conductor. Yeah, that's it, and artistic director of Garsington Opera. We also have Judith Vindevogel, who is a director. We have Roman Klochkov, who is an animator. And we also have Graham Vick joining us a little later. He's coming back from rehearsals and he is a director and also artistic director of Birmingham Opera Company. And our final guest this evening is Sarah Woods, who is a writer and who has worked on Birmingham Opera Company's version of Fidelio. So welcome all. Thank you all so much for joining us, for all of the panel for joining us this evening. So the hints in the title will be following Fidelio. There are 3 versions of Fidelio that we'll be focusing on this evening, and we'll be having wider conversations around those versions as well. So there's a version from Garsington Opera, there's a version from Birmingham Opera Company, and there's also a new version. It's an animation and it's a 15-minute version of the story of Fidelio. So we'll hear a little bit more about those later on. So just to let the audience know at home what's going to be happening this evening, I'm the mediator, so I'm going to be asking some questions. Some are going to be directed to the whole panel, so people will chip in whenever they want to, and some will be focused to specific people on the panel. You also have the opportunity at home to ask your own questions. And if you want to send those through, I've got a live stream of those coming through and I will ask the panel those questions whenever I get the opportunity to as well. So I'm going to be quiet for a bit of time and I'd like to hand over to the rest of the panel. I'm going to call certain people's names and I would love to hear a little introduction about yourself and perhaps a little opening statement about your connection to the story Fidelio, which would be fantastic. So we're going to kick off and start with Dougie Boyd. So I'll hand over to you, Dougie. Everyone else will switch our microphones off.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Dougie Boyd. I'm here representing Garsington Opera as artistic director. And we've just had 5 amazing performances of Fidelio, which are now going to be broadcast on OperaVision. It was incredibly emotional just to make music again, to make music, to make opera to an audience. Remember these people that came to performances? So the whole thing was just remarkable to make music. And I think Fidelio is probably the perfect opera for our times. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as the conversation goes on.
Thank you, Dougie. We'll now hear from Sarah Woods.
Hi, I'm a playwright and sort of activist and educator, and I work across all sort of media, but do a lot of opera actually. And Fidelio in 2002 was my very first opera that I did with the brilliant Birmingham Opera Company, who I've worked with a number of times since and who do always radical, important work.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll hear from Judith Vindevogel.
Yes, I'm Judith. I'm director of WALPURGIS. It's a music theatre company in Antwerp. And I'm a singer myself, so there is the link with opera. I'm also working in theatre, and my connection with Fidelio dates from a couple of years already. We started with a kind of a libretto reading, we called it, with actors and singers, and then we also made an opera for children, which was 45 minutes, and now we worked on this animated version of 15 minutes. So it's becoming smaller and smaller.
Thank you, Judith. And then I'd love to hear from Roman, but I think he's darted off somewhere, so we might have to come back to him. So just to mention, I said earlier, Graham Vick is joining us from rehearsals, and Toby Spence as well is in Valencia rehearsing something at the moment, so he'll join us when he can. So just to kick off, actually, Judith, from listening to you and a little bit about your amazing creation, your animation. Or shall I speak to Roman because he's nearly here before we do that? Roman, do you want to do an introduction? No? Okay, we'll kick off. Judith, so I was really interested in how you managed to get a 3-hour epic story into 15 minutes worth of animation and knowing which bits to choose. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, it's not easy, of course, to reduce an opera in a story of 3 hours in just 15 minutes. So it was kind of hard to choose, and I really had to make some difficult choices, because in the children performance there was still Marceline, and there was also Florestan in real life. And because I couldn't get, I couldn't, the time was too short to explain the relation with Marceline and Leonora in 15 minutes. So I just had this idea to make a cat of Marceline. And because she's always in the very near to Leonora, so in that sense, I just wanted to have her in it, or still. But so I really focused on in a way, on what happens before the opera starts. And I thought it was quite important, especially when you think of young children, to really have this transformation from Leonore, from a girl into a boy. I thought that was dramatically very interesting to show that. And then for the rest, it's just about the liberation. And of course, what I added too is the Ode an die Freude, the European hymn, that I thought was really well placed to finish also the opera and the liberation of Florestan.
Thank you. And just following on from that, with the angle about the audience being young people that you're trying to reach out to, with this specific telling of the story, what else apart from that transformation speaks out and is attractive about that story to young people, do you think?
Well, I think that in my view, if you transpose the story to today, as is shown in the animation, Florestan and Leonora are really young activists, from all different kind, because Florestan is somebody of color, Leonora is not. So it's really a kind of shared ideals and shared words. I don't know whether that's the right word. Of what you think is important, and this solidarity of people caring for the planet, caring for humanity, and all that kind of things. I think that's something really to share with the young audience also. And then of course you have this, this when you think about fairy tales, it's a lot of the time when you are talking about for small children, it's a lot of the time it's about the prince is going to save the princess from the monster and that kind of things. And what I like in this opera of Beethoven is that he he really inverses this this gender stereotype, and it's Leonora who is going to free Florestan, and I think, yeah, it's quite modern in a way. This I mean, yeah, it should really speak to people of today, I think.
Thank you, Judith. Some really great points there. And I think it would be nice as the whole panel to have a little chat about that as well. And following on from the fact that there's a female protagonist in this, which is really refreshing and nice to see. So we'll talk about that. But first, we've got Roman here with us. Hi, Roman. Do you want to do a very quick introduction to yourself? Just to tell us a bit about who you are would be fantastic.
So my name is Dimitri. My name is Roman. And I'm I was I was happy to animate this story that was written by Judith, and we got some remarks, and we got some animatics, and we got some discussions, and it's all comes to life, and I'm just happy, and I don't know what to say actually, because I'm just very happy with the results and the timing, because that's all about the timing.
Yeah, well, you should be happy, because it's such an exciting product that you've made, and such an exciting version of the story. I'd be really interested to know what the process of the animation is, because that's something that I certainly don't know about. I'm sure a lot of the panel don't know about. What is the process of doing that and working with Judith?
It's digital, so it's drawing. The first version I was prepared on my iPad, just in Procreate app, with a very rough animation, and after all, I was animated frame by frame, so you have 25 in 1 second. I was. It was not realistic to make 25 for 1 second, so I hold it on 12, sometimes 10. So so it's like 1,500 in 1 minute, and it's hand draw it, but on the digital. Planchets, tablets, and etc. So I was doing the line animation, and then it was sent to my wife on opposite side of the table, and she was coloring frame by frame during the long evenings, and while kids were sleeping. And then in betweens we was working on the timing globally, because it have to be locked at the moment for the musicians, so we were not able to animate just like free animation. It was really music limited, and it's also good because otherwise there is no end of story. So it was really exciting to make it possible to manage. That's two worlds in one, and I see a lot of possibilities yet for animation, for different kind of camera, for records, and so I see only the mistakes. But it's I'm also glad it's with the colors. So for me, it's really comes to life when I see the color version, actually, and with the music, I believe for someone who see it for the first time, it's something different. I hope so, and I hope also that I answered your question.
You did an amazing job. Thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear about your process, and it sounds really time consuming as well. So that version you can catch on OperaVision. That's live, I think, tonight, so you can watch that for those of you who haven't yet. Thank you, Roman. So to open it out to the rest of the panel now, it'd be nice to hear from Sarah and Dougie as well, if you have any reflections on this next point. But Judith raised some brilliant points about the story and which parts of it speak to young people and us more generally as a society. This whole weekend is themed around this opera. What is it about Beethoven's music that resonates? He only wrote one opera, so what is so special about it that has, what's the attraction that's kept us wanting more? So is there anybody that wants to go first? Dougie,
sure.
Yeah.
I don't want to butt in. I think it's absolutely relevant to living here and now in 2020. I think it's got a universality about it. I mean, of course, it's about surviving oppression and salvation from tyranny. But above all, in my opinion, and there's so many ways of interpreting Fidelio, but above all, for me, it's about hope. Hoffnung is a word that appears many, many, many times during the opera, and it's about love. And boy, do we need some of that at the moment. And I think that is the essence why this music that was written so many years ago is relevant to 2020. Which is maybe even another wider conversation about, I mean, I hate the word classical music. I think it should be banned. I think what we're performing is some of the greatest music that's ever been created. And Beethoven in general, but Fidelio in particular, I think is you can give the perfect example of why it's relevant to today, not just in the narrative, but the emotions that are contained within the opera, and this happens in the symphonies as well. And Beethoven to me is a composer that can express every single emotion that human beings are capable of expressing. And by that, I mean from the light to the dark. So he can be humorous. He can be sometimes banal for the right reason. I mean, I think Marcellina and Giacchino, Giacchino basically wants 2.4 children and have a normal life. That's his kind of goal at this point. But he can express the most incredible ecstasy, Beethoven, not Giacchino, but and of course love. But Beethoven can also express terror and grief and everything in between. And if that isn't a recipe for us to be shouting about why our music is absolutely essential for the human condition today, I don't know what is, because I don't know any popular music culture that can express what I've just described.
Thanks, Dougie. Yes, Sarah.
So obviously, everything that Dougie has already said, but I suppose imprisonment and freedom are massive themes that we've sort of stumbled into as a globe this year, as we've all sort of found ourselves in prisons in addition to the prisons we might already have been in. And I also think that at a time of massive inequality and rising intolerance, thinking deeply about freedom, about who has it and who doesn't have it, and why, and what we can do about that, and also what part we play in that, how we might be culpable, is really, really important. Judith spoke a little bit about Leonora's journey, which sort of asks us, what do we love? What do we care about? And how are we fighting for it? How are we standing up for that? And also, I suppose, in terms of gender, what happens when we move out of our assigned gender and the prison that creates for some of us more than others, but for all of us in all sorts of different ways? How are we variously restricted by our gender? And when we move out of that gender, how is our life and the lives of those around us changed? And I guess we tend to watch Fidelio and listen to Fidelio and cast ourselves as Leonora. And I think it's interesting also to think about, well, if we contain all of the characters, each one of us, And I think that's something that Beethoven does very powerfully, the way that he draws those different characters. How much of us is also Pizarro, and how do we take responsibility for that?
Thank you, Sarah. Great. There's actually one question that's come in specific for Dougie for Garsington, which is about the link to Mozart. If you want to expand a little bit more.
And what was the question in particular?
The question in particular is about, what do you think about what I see? Equality between Beethoven's direct learnings from Mozart, especially in Don Giovanni? Question mark.
Well, I mean, I guess certainly Don Giovanni also expresses terror, as well as, I mean, it's also hilarious. I mean, you know, so, and that Mozartian ability to go from the dark to the light and back again in very quick succession is something that then Beethoven developed, and it's in the orchestral writing as well. You know, every single word is mirrored in a sound painting in the orchestra. I think where Beethoven is totally different from Mozart is that the writing for the singers is completely uncompromising. So, you know, Mozart often would see who had been cast first, and sometimes some of these astonishing arias were written in the last minute, you know, and the ink was barely dry before they actually started rehearsing, because, as I understand it, I think Mozart wanted to see, you know, it's Nancy Storace, so I wanted, you know, I'm going to write for her. It's absolutely for her, and for her to express her timbre and her kind of voicing and her phrasing. Whereas Beethoven, my feeling is that he was not remotely interested in who the singers were. This is how it had to be. And that's why, I mean, particularly Leonora's role, but for all the singers, it's incredibly demanding, because it's totally uncompromising, and you're at the kind of technical edge of what is possible, because he had no kind of, you know, as one might say, not real any empathy for any particular singer. It just had to be like this.
Thanks, Dougie. I just wonder if as well you could expand a little bit more on Garsington's version.
Yeah.
Was it reduced?
Yeah. So just also taking up from what Sarah said, which is so interesting about imprisonment, which obviously and how almost everybody in that opera is in their own prison in some sense. But we also, of course, had so many limitations on what was possible in this pandemic. You know, there were legal issues about what could be put on stage and what wasn't able to be put on stage. And we tried to turn that round to being something that was innovative and creative rather than constricting. So you must shut me up if I'm talking too much, but if there were certain aspects of it that were just made to work in a way that was beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, the concept came from a film that I had commissioned in 2016 with my other hat on, because I was principal conductor of l'Orchestre de Chambre de Paris. And I commissioned Peter Mumford, who was a wonderful lighting designer and director and filmmaker, to make a film for concert performances at the Philharmonie in Paris, and the film expresses the sentiment and the atmosphere of Fidelio, but it also tells the narrative. We took the dialogue out, you know, which is one of the issues I think about Fidelio, in this Singspiel, where you go from arias to then, as it were, a play, and then back into the arias or ensembles. So we took that out and embedded that into the film. We then had members of the Philharmonia Orchestra in a new version that was created by Francis Griffin, who reorchestrated it for a chamber version of Fidelio. Some of your listeners might be aware of, there are amazing arrangements of Mahler's Fourth Symphony and Das Lied von der Erde, Song of the Earth, for chamber ensembles, which are incredible. Actually, they're not better, they're not worse, but they just give you new ears and new transparency to these works. And it's the same kind of principle that we put in place for Fidelio. So we had the musicians in a kind of semicircle, spatially spaced, in spatially distanced, in front of this huge film, huge screen. I was conducting the orchestra, and the soloists, the principals, were behind me in a kind of pool of light, which was sometimes like a square, almost like they were in a prison, and sometimes that would disperse, and especially when Florestan was freed from his prison. And the principals, as it were kind of in camera. They were emoting to us, to the audience, and you'll see that in OperaVision. And the last thing I just wanted to say was that the issue, of course, of choruses at the moment is pretty significant. But we had, just coincidentally, we kept our young artist program going all through the summer digitally, all sorts of things, masterclasses, and as we did with our learning and participation department, they did incredible stuff. At primary adults with stroke survivors at Stoke Mandeville, amazing amount of work that they did over the summer. And with the young artist program, we kept this digital work going. But one of the things we did just by chance was we tried to make a Zoom version of the Prisoner's Chorus. And I laid down a silent conducting track because I didn't want it to be a click track. I thought that was anti-music. And then our wonderful head of music, Jonathan Swinard, who was in isolation in Vancouver, put down a piano track. And then he coached every individual singer in their own isolation, which goes back to what Sarah's talking about, in their bedrooms all over the world, to put down their own track. And we created the Prisoner's Chorus. It was then edited and then embedded into the film. We took the piano out from Jonathan, and we accompanied it live with the Philharmonia on stage with the Prisoner's Chorus. And that was, I found an incredibly moving thing, because it had all sorts of connotations of where we are in 2020 with these faces of the chorus. I should shut up now, but that was the kind of concept that made it happen.
No, thanks, Dougie. It's been really interesting to hear, and amazing that you guys have carried on your engagement work and also staying connected with the young chorus as well. So if you want to catch that, anybody that's watching this now, that's live on OperaVision as well. You can watch that version and that Prisoner's Chorus that Dougie was talking about. So we've got Graham Vick with us. Hello, Graham Vick.
Hi, Gitika.
How are you?
Hello.
Very good. Hello, everyone.
So I think it's a really good time, actually, Graham, to hear a little bit from you. Don't want to put you on the spot, but Dougie was talking a little bit about his process with Garsington, and also how during COVID he's taken video versions, the orchestra, played with recordings and clips of chorus at home, so married together lots of different ways of storytelling. And I think that's a really good, nice leeway onto Birmingham Opera Company's version and how you decided to tell the story of Fidelio. So it might be worth just opening up a little bit and telling us a bit more about your version.
It was the second opera we did once we embraced the participants and site-specific work. It's my favorite opera. I should start by saying that. It's absolutely my favorite opera. So I was very, very keen to do it. Unlike Dougie, we looked at the dialogue, which is, of course, an issue in Fidelio, and decided to help it. We decided to expand it, to adjust it, and to open it out a little bit to the world. One of the joys of the opera is how it starts in such a simple, domestic, everyday world. And little by little, it draws you into this enormous myth, a huge journey that is, in a male world, of course, about the Orphic myth, journey into the darkness, and love bringing you out to the light. It's an excessively male view of the piece, I think. From a woman's point of view, it's how Mrs. Florestan discovers herself to be Leonora. How somebody's wife, defined as their wife, through love, through a lot of small actions, finds herself doing one step by step, a series of what become heroic actions. But the piece never works if you have a heroic dramatic soprano giving a wonderful dramatic performance, because actually, you know, a lot of the music is Mozartian. There's a lot of humor in there. And when she's going down, when she's trying to persuade Rocco to let her go down to the private cell, he makes jokes about it. When she says, "Oh, I've got courage and strength, ich habe Mut und Kraft," he turns the joke around on it. Says, "Yeah, what? You with your lily white hands and the woodwinds, pop, 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 pop." It's a joke. This marvelous lightness at the beginning that lets you through to this woman who then ends up in the second act digging the grave for her husband, but also having the great breakthrough moment of the opera, which is the reason I love it so much, when she looks at this prisoner and says, "Actually, I don't care who you are, I'm going to save you. It doesn't matter if you're my husband anymore. I'm going to save you." The absolute linchpin of the piece, I think, that phrase in the middle of the duet. So with that kind of a story, you've got somewhere to move with an entire community. Everybody understands imprisonment. Everybody understands that in trying to rescue someone else is your best chance of saving yourself. These very big themes. And of course, the paradoxes of the opera itself, which are, you know, the myth is it's about brotherly love and so on. But of course, the play was about an aristocrat. It was about aristocrats, no? It was about Lady Leonora trying to rescue Lord Florestan from a prison in the Terror after the French Revolution, is where it begins life. And also, I always think it's very interesting that when, on the night the Nazi of the Anschluss, when Austria was joined to the Third Reich, the Wiener Staatsoper celebrated the Anschluss with a performance of Fidelio. And on the night the Allies liberated Vienna from the Third Reich, the Wiener Staatsoper celebrated with a performance of Beethoven's Fidelio. So I think somehow the poor opera's got itself lost as some huge cultural icon, when what it is a profoundly beautiful story, love story, and incredibly human, which is why it starts in this marvelous, simple, domestic way before plunging itself into the heart of myth. That'll do for a start, will it?
That's a cracking start. Thanks, Graham. That's fab. I think I want to expand a little bit more on that with you and the rest of the panel. But I've just got one question that's come in live, and if I don't ask it now, I'll totally forget. So I'm going to do that. This question is to Judith and Roman, aimed at about the distribution of the animation in schools and perhaps on social media. What's your plan in making something that's obviously not on the stage, it's going to be on the screen? What was the thought process behind that?
You mean how we are going to show it, or?
Yes, to get it seen and get it seen by lots of young people.
Oh, okay. Well, hello. We have several organizations in Belgium anyway who are, there is one organization who is specialized in films for young audiences. And so I'm talking with them about this project. But of course, I hope that not only online, but also that we could show it also live one time. In fact, there were plans to show it live in November, but we just canceled all that because I don't think it's really the right moment to do that now. But yes, so this organization, Jeff, it's called. They have a whole network of schools and teachers and all that. So and I'm sure there is also in Germany you have Junge Ohren, this network of Junge Ohren. So I'm sure. I must admit that we didn't do that yet, this work, because we were so concentrated on the artistical work now. But yeah, this is definitely something that has to be done still. But I'm sure that with OperaVision, we will use also a very wide audience.
Thanks, Judith. Yeah, I think it's amazing, and it'll be seen by lots of people. And for me as an artist anyway, COVID's really sort of shaken my brain up a bit to think a little bit more about interesting ways of getting stories out that isn't necessarily the stage or the conventional way that we see opera being told and theatre being told. Sarah, I've got a question directed for you. You're a writer, so why bring a writer onto a piece that's already been written?
Yes, good question. You probably should have asked Graham that before he employed me. But I think there's two answers. Well, there's probably more answers, but I'll give you two answers. Firstly, I think there are a number of classic stories that hang in the ether. You know, mythic was the word that Graham used. And at different points in time, they become really important again. And as we start to work with them, we're not just exploring them as they exist, but their relationship to our time, to our world. And so a contemporary writer with the skills that they bring, you know, an ability to understand story, to creatively problem solve, and to see the deep patterns in a piece of work, mean that I think a writer can make a useful contribution to drawing that story closer to our world and our current experiences, to clarify and to deepen and to fine tune. And secondly, and specifically in relation to the brilliant work that Birmingham Opera Company do, is the job of working with community performers. And so my job there was to work with Graham, with Richard, with Ron, to really explore their relationship to the story, to the themes of Fidelio, and to allow them to explore their lived experience, and from that to create material that could communicate that, could open up that story even further.
And how many community volunteers were working on that particular piece? Do you remember roughly ballpark figure?
I do. There were 80. Plus a volunteer chorus.
Plus a volunteer
We had
chorus.
80 actors who were at the heart of the piece, actually, each of whom had their own prison.
And I would really love to know a little bit more about the artistic process on how you go about taking 80.
Yeah, well, with some difficulty, and of course you don't always have 80. The reality of it is that at any time you have 40 or 50, and that over the rehearsal period, you eventually have 80 on the first night and maybe on the last night, because there's a party, so they'll go to that. And in between, you might have 60, you might have 55. I remember on this on the night that it was filmed for the opening of BBC4, I remember us at 7:20 us sending a taxi to pick up the two bridesmaids because they weren't going to come. I'm begging them on the phone, and they arrived at 7:30. High risk stuff. It was one of the biggest pieces that we did in terms of input from we had the idea of the tent, of course, so we had the earth, and we had this body of people, and we wanted to tell a story of everybody's prison. And so the big idea really they had two big moments. One was in the prisoners' chorus, the musical prisoners' chorus, when in fact the audience who had been imprisoned themselves and trapped walked underneath the orchestra and out into an enormous empty space, huge tents, earth everywhere. And there was a kind of installation garden of people's prisons, completely created by the actors that we walked around, interacted with, and watched. And then we also, I did something which used to be quite common. We inserted an overture which Beethoven wrote later, called Leonora No. 3. We inserted that in the second act before the finale as an opportunity for those actors to do their own specific 13-minute journey towards the music. That was very specifically what it was. And it was a piece of work devoted to them. It was their specific moment of ownership of the themes of the piece before the finale. So that as well as supporting, resonating, being part of it, there was one moment when they took it over, actually, when it was their piece. And that was very beautiful, actually, as I like to say.
Yeah, there's some really fascinating and some like stunning visuals that they've created in those moments. And anyone that's watching now and hasn't caught that, Birmingham Opera Company's version is also on OperaVision for a while, so you can catch that as well. Just doing a bit of plugging, OperaVision. So following on from that, Graham, we talked a lot before you came with Dougie and Sarah and Judith and Roman about its importance now and its relevance now. And you've also mentioned about the people that when Birmingham Opera Company made it, who it reached a really diverse range of people. How can we ensure that it's sung and it's heard by all of those people, and perhaps more specifically honing in on ethnicities and a range of ethnicities to do with opera? I also stress, how do we ensure that it's sung and it's heard by, but also made by, I think is really important, because often
it's not the same issue. They're not separate issues, Gitika, are they? I mean, if we want people to come, they need to see that they need to recognize themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
If we're saying these are universal stories, they need to be represented universally. It's pointless inviting people in and they don't recognize themselves. So that's been at the heart of our work for the last 20 years, as you know. And it's crucial. I mean, the first thing, though, answer to your question, is you have to want to do it. So the first way to get in a new audience, to make sure that you're speaking to all communities, is to want to do it. If you want to do it enough, you'll make it happen. Because in opera, there are so many excuses not to do it. There are so many get-out clauses. And always what happens, again and again, nobody believes how much money we spend on it. Actually, it's the terrible truth of the matter. It's expensive. So lots of people approach us for co-productions and collaboration, and we end up doing it on our own because only we invest in it at this level. It's difficult. You have to be proactive. You have to invest. You have to create a theatrical, a musical world where people recognize themselves, which means opportunity and training. And you also need to open yourselves out to how to communicate. I mean, on a basic level, you know, I speak to you in one way, you know, but I speak to my brother in a completely different way. And if I go, I don't know, I speak to, it's what we all do. We all shift the way we speak. I'm in Italy at the moment. I'm a different director in Italy. It's a different language, a different race, a different nation. And indeed, I'm being a bit Italian tonight because I've been doing this all day. You shift. So if you want, you need to find the audience that you want. And then your job is to figure out how to speak with them. Your job is how to take these things that you love and care about and find a way of expressing them that reaches, because we all know the works are great. But what you have to do is to remove the code. You know, I mean, rehearsing is all about removing the code. No? A piece of music is just a code on a piece of paper. It's dots on lines. That's not the music. That's the code to have it written down. So in order to turn that into a piece of life, the code has to be cracked and go through a human being and be brought back to life. Once it's brought back to life, it's then the response of the person who's brought it back to life to communicate it. The person you're singing to doesn't need to know the code. Indeed, if they hear the code, it's not a very good performance. So on every level, we have to break the code. On every level, we have to bring every element of what we do and how we do it back to life. Not just the music, but the way we look, the way we listen, who we are, the way we welcome people in, the assumptions we make in the way we talk about it, the assumptions we make in the whole language of the thing. Everything has to be questioned. I mean, we do now, I mean, stuff that I never thought we would at the beginning. Mobile telephones are, of course, allowed, drinks are allowed, and the more we allow it, the more respectful people are. But I learned very early on that what I said about volunteers and rehearsals, people come late, people miss rehearsals. Of course they do. They have their lives to live. If we want to invite them in, there's no point in my saying, oh, this is theatre, we have to be disciplined, rehearsals begin on time, or you're letting the team down, this is how it happened. That was how I was taught, it's true. But it doesn't welcome people in. It's not their rhythm. It's an imposition. So in fact, we let latecomers in. We do, for instance, we don't keep them out. We let them in, and all those kind of assumptions, it's about making your audience feel at ease and comfortable, because the more at ease they are, the more it's going to go in.
Thanks, Graham. Those are really great points, especially when referring to audience as well. I'd really like to hear from Dougie and Sarah and Judith if you have some points on this. But if I was to also mention about making sure people are feeling welcome also within creative teams and not necessarily audience members or cast members. When I mean creative teams, I guess I mean directors, conductors, and all the rest that comes with it to make an opera.
Sarah, do you want to go first, or you're muted? I think
you go ahead.
No, I mean, I find I can't really follow on from what Graham said, because he spoke so eloquently, and I agree with every single word that he said. I think all the responsibility can't be on us. And the problem is, I mean, just in my experience in Garsington, at the learning and participation level or education level, I mean, we're engaging with actually thousands of people over the course of a year. And we find that, especially at primary level, there is no, I don't know what the right word is, prejudice or any kind of preconception as to what opera is. It's just about singing, and singing is an absolutely intrinsic part of what we are as human beings, like dance actually as well. They're intrinsic things that we do from the moment we are able to utter a sound, is dance and sing. And if you can get kids early enough, and we have had enormous success with kids, it can be life-changing. The problem is, it's like putting your finger in a big flood that's coming through a dam wall, you know, because I mean a DAM wall, because the resources that are happening at, I'll be blunt, at state level, in terms of changing perceptions about what I talked about, I think, before Graham joined, about just trying to create circumstances where we're talking about great music and get out of this kind of stereotype or label that something is classical, because classical seems to be stereotyped with something that is old-fashioned or something that's out of date or not relevant to our lives. And I think the biggest battle we have, I said this on another Zoom thing yesterday, the biggest battle we have in the future is to change that mentality about what our music is. And then maybe we should start by just banning the word classical for a start. That would help. But I think what Birmingham's done, is inspiring, and there are many organisations that are being as inclusive as possible. I think we've got a huge journey still to go ahead, and certainly in my experience, we're completely it's at the top of our agenda about how we do this. But I think it starts from the very, very beginning. It starts from kids and goes up from that. I mean, one particular, I will shut up in 1 second, but one particular project that we are doing for 2022 with Roxana Panufnik and Jessica Duchin is a second community opera. And the last one involved about 180 community members of the public, if you like, from ages 5 to 80. And plus professional singers, plus professional orchestra, plus youth orchestra. And we're repeating that. And the subject, very, very briefly, is centered around a Syrian refugee girl who comes to this country. And without giving too much away, she kind of discovers a way forward in her life because she turns out to be an absolutely brilliant cricketer. And there's a connection there with our opera company because it has one of the most beautiful cricket grounds in the world, although that's not the reason this story has evolved. And we're hoping, and in fact, the evidence I think is there, that just to have a story that resonates will encourage, especially young people. I mean, you might think that Bucks, for instance, is terribly sort of monochrome in terms of ethnicity, but actually, High Wycombe, where we work, is an extremely mixed community, and one of the absolute raison d'etres of this new opera is to engage with communities that might otherwise not take up the inspiration of what singing can do.
Thanks, Dougie. We'll go to Sarah, then I've got one last question just to follow on from what you said, Dougie.
I guess my point sort of goes beyond opera, but it's also relevant to opera. That I just think that anyone who's privileged enough to hold any sort of space, physical or otherwise, really has a duty to open that space and to hold it well, which is what Graham's talking about when he's talking about the porosity, the fluidity, that you're not either in or out, you can actually move between, which is common to every cell in our body and to the way the whole world's made. And also to give space away too, to be really brave and give space away. And I think we have to identify and resist, Graham was talking about get out clauses, these perfectly logical explanations as to why things can't change and why things just are the way they are. And to really notice those in ourselves and in the work that we do and take responsibility for them.
I think the giving the space thing is, I think, to your point really is, you're right. We have to change who's at the top as well. I mean, and that's happening little by little. We've just appointed a music director from Birmingham, from a British Indian family whose first opera experiences were our operas, but now he's the company's music director and is leading it alongside me. We're able to do that because it's happened, because he's there. You can't, on the other hand, just decide to do that until someone is there. Things are shifting, things are changing. After 20 years in Birmingham, there are people coming through. We've developed enough singers that in Rheingold, the next piece that we're doing, we're able to cast all of the gods, the elite superior race. They will all be Black and mixed ethnicity artists. So at least we're going to tell the story that the top people, we're doing all of that. Things are on the move. But as Sarah says, the most important thing yourself is I'm very good at lots of things, but I need help, and I'm very excited to have Alpesh pushing me forwards and taking me along alongside. I mean, it's about sharing the space, absolutely so.
Thanks, Graham. So we've got 5 minutes left, guys, and I've just got one final question that perhaps we'll finish. We'll hear from everybody. If you could keep it short and sweet, that would be great, but it is quite a packed question, so apologies in advance. Just following on from what all of you were saying about story and its importance and making space and all the rest of it, and how important it is that it has to resonate with the people of today. Why do you think repertoire like Fidelio, that this whole event is about, should take up space that potentially a new story or a new commission could fill? And I'll go Judith, because we've not heard from you in a while, then we'll go Graham, Douglas, and we'll finish with Sarah.
But I didn't understand your question.
Sorry, Judith. So the question is, why did you pick Fidelio to tell in the animation rather than commissioning a something new, a new story?
Well, because I think it's worth to tell the story and then to keep also it's also about history and about keeping things and working with things that we know, but make them, to connect with them. It's really, for me, it's also about connection, to connect with what is there and to see how it can resonate also.
Thank you, Judith. We'll hear from Graham.
It's my favorite opera, obviously, I have to say again, because it's one of the peaks of human creation, Fidelio. That's why. It's just one of the absolute pinnacles of what human beings can create. And I know that. And within that and inside that, its extraordinary genius can contain everybody. So that needs to be done. It doesn't need to be done instead of something new. It needs to be done because it needs to be done, and new things need to be done because those new things need to be done. But in order to do the new, we don't need to ignore, I think, certainly not the best of what we have. And sometimes through these extraordinary great pieces, it's easier to speak. They're more transparent.
Thanks, Graham. Dougie?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke earlier about why I think the emotion behind Beethoven's music is so relevant to us today. I think new work is absolutely vitally important, where we should be a living, creating organism of artistic worth, and that absolutely means we have to be creating new work as well. But we are talking here about one of the greatest artists, human beings that has ever lived, capable of never-ending re-evaluation and reinterpretation, both musically and dramatically, and that's why we have to keep performing it. And for me, I think the ultimate criteria, however, is that it must never be routine, and routine is the enemy of art. And that when we come to a piece like Fidelio, we, as Graham has done it in Birmingham, and I hope we did last month at Garsington, we try and approach it that our life depends on it, and this is a message we want to share with as many people as possible.
Thanks, Dougie. And Sarah?
Yeah, well, it's what Dougie and Graham have said, really. It's yes, we want to do this, and we want to do new stories. And sometimes I think we can tend to think that if we are retelling, carrying an old story with us, then it gives new work a greater significance. And I think we also have to be brave and find those new stories that are really important and urgent for us to tell now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I think we've lost Roman on the way, but I just wanted to say a massive thank you for taking the time, all of the panelists tonight. Graham, Sarah, Judith, Dougie, Roman, it's been an absolute pleasure. And Toby, unfortunately, obviously couldn't make it out of rehearsals, so a nod to Toby as well. But that brings us to the end of our event today. Thanks everyone at home for watching, and you can catch all of the versions of Fidelio on OperaVision. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Gitika. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.